I-21F, was in a very bad car accident about 3 years ago. A drunk drive ran a stoplight, cut off a semi-truck, which then crashed into me, sending me crashing into 2 different cars and then ultimately into an embankment. My car was mangled and my leg was crushed, completely destroyed, and it had to be amputated. I also lost a couple fingers, the tip of one and all of another. I'm also left with some gnarly scars that used to bother me, but I'm learning to deal with them. I got a couple different insurance payouts and some pain and suffering money in addition to my medical bills being paid, and with my money I purchased a custom-made leg to take the place of the one I lost. When I have pants and shoes on you can hardly tell unless you're really looking. I still limp, but some days I don't have as pronounced a limp. Earlier today I went to the store with my boyfriend, my sister, her girlfriend, and our mother. I drove. I had to learn to drive with my left foot, but I'm really good at it now. I also bought a new car with my money and had to go through a ton of therapy to get past my PTSD, but I'm doing well there now as well. So, I drove us, and because of my injuries, in addition to my leg I also have chronic hip, neck, and back pain, and some issues with my lungs from the time spent intubated in a medically induced coma that led to pneumonia. I have a handicap placard for my car. I have trouble walking without getting tired, so it really helps to park close to the door. Today I did so and unknowingly took the space from someone who was circling back around for it. Apparently the man had been looking for a close space and had missed the one I took and went down and around. He was still on the other aisle when I pulled in, so I didn't cut him off or anything and had no way of knowing he wanted the spot. He parked in the yellow stripe zone and got out and immediately began confronting me about stealing a space from people who actually need it. How I'm just some kid who has no respect for those who are truly sick and suffering. He then ordered me to move. My group was urging me to just walk away, but this has happened before and once the police were even called. I'm sick of people thinking that just because I'm young that I don't have a legit need for a little extra consideration. I said, okay, and went to the car and got in like I was going to drive off. I was wearing a skirt and leggings, so it wasn't quite obvious at first, but when I sat down I took my leg off and showed it to the man, including my stump. I then asked him if it was okay if I still parked there. He walked away calling me disgusting and rude and said I could have just told him, and I made him look stupid. My group was embarrassed and said that I made things awkward because there was a crowd. Aita, edit. In case anyone was interested. I'm not going to post a photo of my leg because of identification reasons, but I'll describe it. So the base color is ombre whitish green to pale green and it has cherry blossoms painted on it, though sometimes I wear a silicone cover that resembles an actual foot and leg on days when I don't want people to stare at me. I even have temporary stickies I can put on the toes, to make it look like I painted my nails. It's actually really cool. Story 2. This happened during this weekend, me being in my early 30s and my GF in her late 20s. I was invited to a wedding ceremony of a colleague and could bring someone with me. I asked my GF that I've been dating for a year if she would like to join me, and she was really happy because she apparently loves weddings. Since we don't live together, I drove to pick her up so we'd have some time to spare before the ceremony. As she comes out she looks really beautiful and has obviously put in time to fix her hair and makeup. She's also wearing an off-white dress that was rather ornate. As she got in I told her that she looked stunning, but I asked if she could change to a different colored dress for the ceremony. I'm not one for etiquette by far, but one of the few things I have heard everywhere is that you should not wear a white dress to a wedding unless you're the bride. She became pretty upset and wanted to know what was wrong with her dress. I said that it would be inappropriate to wear a white or off-white dress unless you're the bride, and that it's like wedding law or something, trying to be lighthearted about it. She rolled her eyes and said that it was an outdated tradition about women and virginity, and that when her friends got married everyone wore white and that it's not a big thing anymore. I told her that I don't know what the dress code is for this ceremony, but since it's not saying all white clothes, I still thought she should change to another color but white or almost white, because my colleague was getting married and we had no idea how she felt about it. My GF became really upset and told me that I was trying to control what she was wearing and that it was abusive, which honestly made me really upset and hurt. I said something along the lines of, "Fuck, well you shouldn't go to a wedding with an abuser then," and then I told her to fuck off out of my car. She began to cry and wanted to apologize and give me a hug, but I just told her to get out, which she did. Edit. To clarify, we never left the driveway by her home. I did not drop her off in the middle of nowhere or anything like that. I drove off and she called and texted me a bunch. I answered, "I don't want to talk right now," and then turned my phone off and attended the ceremony. The bride was the only one that was wearing white, so I feel as if my gut feeling was the right one. When I got home, my phone had blown up by texts from her and her best friend saying that I was being inconsiderate and controlling and should apologize for my behavior. I've vented to a few friends, most of them agreeing with me, but some have said that it was an asshole thing to tell her that she could not wear her dress, because it had nothing to do with me. I feel as if I was in the right since it was my colleague's wedding and it was better to be safe than sorry, but I'm also not sure if I was being an asshole about the situation. So, Reddit aita? Update. I never expected this thread to get this many replies. I am incredibly thankful for all of you that have reached out and commented, and I really appreciate that you've taken the time to tell me. My GF found out about the thread, don't know if she knew my handle, or just found it, and we talked over the phone. She apologized and I apologized and it was a pretty good talk. She asked if she could come over, and I said no and that it would be best for us to go our separate ways. She got upset and asked why I wouldn't even try to work it out. I basically just said goodbye and then she said my dick was small, which actually made me laugh after what had been a pretty mature conversation, and then she hung up. I'm pretty sad about it. She really made me feel happy, but as many of you have commented, if this was our first disagreement and she called me abusive, how would future disagreements look? I was hurt, but if she did think I was being abusive, it would be the right thing to do, and if she did not think I was being abusive and said it anyways, I would not want to be with her. So anyways, I think things worked out for the best for us both. Again, thank you all, and I will keep trying to respond to all of you, but there are a lot of messages, but I read through them all. Story 3. My M28 wife, F29, gave birth a few days ago. We had what I believe to be a fairly standard pregnancy, and I did my best to take care of things and make it easy for her. I took her to the hospital when she was due and her sister and mother met us there. The problem started when she was taken to the delivery room. She asked the nurse that only her mother and sister, F27, be allowed in the delivery, and then told me that she wanted me to wait until I've delivered and calmed down before letting me into the room. I was kind of shocked and didn't want to make a scene, so I just said okay and sat down in the waiting room. We had not really discussed the plan for the hospital, and I had no reason to think I wouldn't be there when my son was born. I texted her sister if she knew my wife was going to do this. She said no. I told her to ask if my wife was concerned about something because I don't consider myself someone who would have made a fuss or made things more difficult for her. She texted back after a while saying that my wife just doesn't want you to see her like this, and then added that she didn't agree with my wife and tried to convince her, but ultimately it was her choice and I should respect it. I sat in the waiting room for 6 hours getting minimal updates as the labor was fairly slow, and then I decided that there was no point, so I texted her sister that I was going home. I'd meet my son when they brought him home and handle the birth certificate stuff the next day. They came home about 9 hours later and I was finally able to meet my son. When my wife's mother and sister left, she got very angry at me for leaving her at the hospital. I was angry too, but I told her that we can talk about this in a few days because she's just given birth. She wouldn't drop the subject, so I finally told her that she excluded me from the birth of my son for no reason. I didn't see the need to hang around a hospital waiting room for hours doing nothing, and that even her own sister thinks what she did was wrong. She said there could have been complications and I needed to be there, to which I replied that I wouldn't have been there because she kept me out of the room and the doctors would have handled any problems anyways. She called me an inconsiderate asshole and has been talking short with me for several days. Her sister told me I should just apologize and move past it because it was a stressful time for my wife, but I think I'm owed a bigger apology first for how I was excluded from my own son's birth. Story 4. My grandparents owned the lot next to their house. They just used it for more yard space. But when my sister and I were born, Grandpa knocked down the old shed on the empty lot and built a playground for us. Everything was made with his own 2 hands. It was a kid's dream and we both played there any chance we got. And after we grew up, they let the kids of their neighborhood use the place to play with no issues. But then some years later they passed and the house went to my mom. I found out I'm expecting, so my husband, Andre, and I started seriously looking for a house when we'd only been half trying before. Mom suggested we buy my grandparents' house since we know it's a good place and us buying it would keep it in the family. It's still in good shape, has no wah, and is close to a good school. So we bought it for a steal and moved in ASAP. Right away we noticed parents hanging out at the playground with their kids. We didn't mind at first and used the chance to introduce ourselves. Everyone was lovely and younger than I'd expected, but it seems a bunch of couples with kids had taken over the street in the past 5 or so years. The problem arose when neighbor witch, NW, brought her kid over one afternoon. I happened to be by the window and saw a flash of red outside. It was a kid in a red shirt literally standing on the roof of one of the 2-story playhouses, almost 10 feet off the ground. I ran outside, thinking he was alone, and said he needed to get down right now. That's when NW stormed over from who knows where and yelled at me to fuck off and not tell her kid shit. I asked if she was his mom, and after getting a yes, I asked her to make her son get down before he got hurt. She argued, saying I couldn't make them do anything, so I told her this was my property and yes I could. That's when the kid fell, thankfully once he was halfway down and only onto the grass, but he still wailed like he was dying. He was fine. He got up without issue and ran over to NW. She picked him up and said if he'd been hurt she'd have sued me, so I threatened her with the cops if she didn't leave. She flipped me off and called me a gin jockey, random AF. I don't drink at all, let alone gin, but left. Andre was worried other people might try to sue us if their kids got hurt on our land. I hadn't even thought of that, so we put up a fence. Parents came by asking why the fence, so I told them why, and they can thank NW. I heard she's been shunned by the other parents and none of them will let their kids play with hers. I feel guilty her son is getting punished for her actions. Maybe just saying we wanted a fence up instead of telling them about NW would have been kinder? Aita?